So we come to the third part of our series on John's 6th chapter, the Bread of Life Discourse. Jesus is teaching on the Eucharist, his flesh and blood, which is true food for us to eat. And as we make our way through this series, we're invited this week especially to think of this bread come down from heaven as nourishment to sustain us on the journey. And just to make sure we don't miss it, the church throws in the first reading, the prophet Elijah being fed bread from heaven by the angel to sustain him along his journey. I think by now we're at least accustomed to the fact that in Christianity, the extraordinary comes and lives with the ordinary. The supernatural is mingled, mixed, becomes one with the ordinary, the plain. And so we shouldn't be surprised that bread, one of the most ordinary, common, everyday things, is also to become the most supernatural of sustenance in our lives. So much so that Jesus will say, unless you eat this bread and drink this cup, you don't have life in you. That so much that he'll insist that we eat of this flesh and drink of this blood. And I would just suggest that while for us it can be difficult to embrace and understand the fact that bread and wine have become Jesus, that really what is difficult is even more deep than that. It's difficult to embrace and understand and believe, not that God would inhabit bread and wine, but that he would inhabit me, that he would become bread and wine for me to eat, so that he can live in me, that God has chosen to make himself so small, not just so small as bread and wine, but so small as me, to live in my life. And so as we embrace as best we can this Eucharistic reality, I just want us to broaden our perspective enough to receive the greater gift that God is in the process of giving, that it's not enough to make a scientific or mathematic calculation about bread and wine and flesh and blood. Our struggle with the Eucharist isn't to understand the science better. It's to understand that there's more than science, that there's more than what we can touch and see, that there's a deeper and truer reality that runs through life and is God. And to do that without rejecting the most basic and humble and simple aspects of our lives, because that's where God, the divine, that greater force, chooses to come and chooses to come to us. For us to believe in Eucharist, we don't have to believe that the chemical substance of bread and wine has changed, because it hasn't. And when we say that there's a change in substance, we're talking about a substance that is so much more real than the chemical composition. And that reality, the truth of what something is, the truth of personality, the truth of love, this reality of person, the person of God, who chose, again, against all scientific and verifiable and evidence, who chose to become human in the incarnation, who chooses to become bread and wine, who chooses to become part of me, and in becoming part of me, to nourish me and to give me life and to sustain me on this journey. And we're invited, we're welcomed, we're asked by the Lord Jesus today to embrace this sustenance, to eat this bread, to drink this cup, to take of his flesh and blood, because they are true food. And like Elijah, to get up and eat. Otherwise, the journey will be too long for us.